Well, good morning, Restoration community, and thank you for being here today as we continue this Take Heart series. And I know that right now it feels like, man, I wish we could be together, and I can't wait for that day either, because teaching to a camera is not nearly as fun as teaching directly to you. But thank you for being here online today as we continue this. I'm here at the Restoration office today, and I'm excited about what we're going to talk about. But before we get into that, I do want to take a quick second to say thank you to all of the moms. Not just thank you for what you do for us, because we know that list is exhaustive and overwhelming, but thank you so much for just who you are. Thank you for being the people you are. Because I think that's what children need to see, your spouses need to see, the community needs to see, is the kind of person you are. And thank you for being who you are. And right now, I also want to say thank you for what you do as well. Because what you're doing is pretty awesome. We know that we're in an unprecedented time and uncharted waters, and it can feel overwhelming, but thank you for keeping your family together, keeping your relationships up, keeping your kids engaged, keeping your spouse from going crazy, just all the things that are happening around you. Thank you for continuing to be who you are right now, because the world needs moms right now, maybe more than ever. And so thank you for all that you do and for who you are. And real quick, as a disclaimer to my mom, I thank you for everything you've done for me. I thank you for the person you are. And if you're watching this online, I also just want to say that it's not my fault my hair is this long. It's a pandemic. There are not barbershops open, so I can't get it cut. So before you shoot me a text saying, Kevin, what's going on? It's not my fault. Blame it on the COVID, okay? But anyways, I don't know last week what was going on, if I was just anxious or if I was just done with the introverted part of me and really wanted to see people or what. But I was like, guys, we're getting in the car and we're gonna go do a little friendship parade. And so our family got in one car and a couple other people got in their cars, and we just drove through some neighborhoods near us to say hi to people. And our kids made signs and they just said like, hey, we love you, or hope you're having a good day, or whatever. And we're driving through neighborhoods just to say hi to people. Now you might see us doing that this week in your neighborhood, who knows? But we were out driving and just kind of seeing people. And so we're holding up these signs, and Oliver, my son, he's in the back seat, and he is so excited because Oliver hasn't seen people in a long time. And for him, he's so extroverted and he's hated this, and he just wants to talk to people, hang out with people, see people. So we're driving through one of the neighborhoods and we saw one of his friends from church, and he's so excited to see Easton. And so he holds up his sign out the window that says, we love you. And he's leaning out the window, yelling at Easton, like, hey, Easton, I'm here, Easton. And he's holding up a sign. Now, Easton fully knows that Oliver's there. You can't miss Oliver when he's in a neighborhood. He is so loud. He will let you know. But he's holding up the sign and he's like, Easton, we love you, Easton. And so we turn around, we turn the corner, we're driving back through the neighborhood, and Oliver starts to lean out of the window some more to try to yell at Easton as long as he possibly can. Now, I thought we were done with the stop. So I start rolling up his window, and I'm pulling a little button and it's rolling up the window, but he's leaning on the window and he's pushing the window down because he's not done yet. And so eventually the two kind of collide and the window gets pushed down because Oliver's pushing it down, and now that window is stuck. It's stuck in place. And I realize that it's not going to go back up. And I hear Oliver whisper to Jane, the window's stuck. And then Jane whispers to Oliver, you need to tell Dad. And Oliver's like, I don't want to tell Dad. And Jane's like, you need to tell Dad. And Oliver's like, I don't want to tell Dad. And so they start arguing some more about what they should do, and Oliver's trying to now fix it on his own. And so Oliver starts to push on the window, and he's pushing it up a little bit more and a little bit more, but it's not really moving a whole lot. And every time he gets it a little bit further up, it falls back down. He gets a little bit further up and it falls back down. And Jane finally is like, Oliver, you gotta tell Dad. And Oliver says, I don't want to tell Dad. And Jane, poor naive Jane, who doesn't know much apparently about her father, says, you know Dad can fix anything. Which is not true. If you know me at all, you know that that is not accurate at all. But she thinks that Dad can fix anything, and if Oliver just tells me, I can handle it. And finally, I've listened to the whole thing. I know the window's broken. I know that they are arguing about it. I've heard the whole conversation, but finally, Oliver speaks up and he says, "Hey, Dad, I need to tell you something. And Jane told me that I have to tell you. But I broke the window. It's not going back up." And I just kind of laughed and I was like, "I figured, buddy." And I said, "I'll fix it when we get home." And Jane goes, "See, Oliver, I told you he could fix anything." Again, not true. I did though, guys, I did. This is a big day. I did fix the window. That's the end of the story. But it was exciting for me. But anyways, it was like this thing where they had this inner turmoil, right? Of, do we admit the problem we have or do we keep it to ourselves? Do we actually come clean about the thing that's going on, or do we just try to let this brokenness continue? And we've been in this Take Heart series for a few weeks now, and we're going to continue looking at every time that Jesus says the words take heart, which is the word tharseo in Greek. And he's saying take heart, or it could be translated cheer up, or it could be translated take courage. And I don't know about you, but I think these words are words we need to hear right now more than ever in our culture, in our society, in our church, in our own lives. We need to take heart. We need to take courage. We need to have good cheer. We need to not give up. We need to not give in. We need to not back down. We need to move forward because we have a heart. We have a courage. We have a cheer that doesn't come from us, but comes from a Savior. And if you pay attention to every story we're going to look at in this series, what you'll find is a common thread, that these stories happen around miracles. And what are miracles? To me, it's those moments where the brokenness of earth meet the perfection of heaven, right? Where you see a broken person, a broken system, a broken thing that comes into contact with the perfection of heaven. And when the two meet, a miracle happens. And I believe that today, that is still the case. That when we allow our brokenness, or the brokenness of our world, or the brokenness of our society, when that meets the perfection of heaven, we will see miracles happen. This is why we don't believe that heaven is just something that happens in the future, but heaven is something that can happen now. Because Jesus allowed his perfection to meet the brokenness of the people around him. And when those two met, miracles happened. And I think they can still happen today. And here's the thing. I believe we don't see as many miracles today. And I believe that we don't see them because we think, here's why we think we don't see them, is because we think heaven is so distant. And I would say that's probably not it. It's not because heaven is so far away. To me, the reason is because we won't admit that we need healing. I don't think it's because heaven is too distant. I don't think it's because a Savior stays so far away from us that we can't approach him or find him, or that he's silent, or he's sleeping, or he's somewhere else. I believe that it's because we won't admit that we need saving. That heaven is here waiting for miracles to happen, that heaven is here waiting for healing to happen, that heaven is here waiting to give us courage, to give us cheer, to give us heart, but we will not admit we need it. And we're not meeting heaven halfway. And today I want to look at a story where we have to see a guy who admits it, who knows his need, and who can say his need out loud. And for so many of us to admit our flaws, to admit our needs, to admit our imperfections, to admit our brokenness is so hard, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, we're wired in a culture where showing these kinds of things is a weakness. To admit you have imperfections, to admit you have weaknesses is a joke. It's something we never talk about. Maybe you've been to a job interview where you're supposed to say your biggest weakness, and you do the Michael Scott thing where you say, my greatest weaknesses are I work too hard, I care too much, I just love people with abandon, I'm just too nice, I'm just too friendly. That's my biggest weakness. And what we do is we make our weaknesses into strengths, and we're trying to, even in weakness, bolster ourselves up a little bit higher. And what we see is we have to be willing to admit that we need saving, or else we'll never find a Savior. We have to admit that we need healing, or we'll never find a healer. We have to admit that there is brokenness, or we'll never see the kingdom of heaven meet us with its perfection. And we'll never see what a miracle looks like. And the reality is, sometimes it feels like heaven is so far away, but maybe it's closer than we think. We just don't want to see it. And maybe our brokenness is much deeper than we think. And maybe we just don't want to see it. And today, we're going to see a blind man who's going to teach us how to see, how close heaven is, how deep our brokenness is, and what a miracle can really look like. So the story takes place in the book of Mark. And if you have a Bible with you, I would encourage you to actually open it up. Grab a Bible, pull out your phone. You can Google it if you need to. It's Mark chapter 10. And it's in verse 46. We're just going to read through this story. And it's actually a pretty fascinating little story because it's the last miracle that Mark records. This is before Jesus is heading into Jerusalem, and he will eventually have the triumphal entry and then be crucified. And all this is about to happen right in front of Jesus, but this is the last miracle that Jesus performs before all of that happens. And it's with a guy who's called blind Bartimaeus. So it says in verse 46, then they came to Jericho. Now Jesus is with his disciples. They are walking through kind of a tour of cities on their way to Jerusalem. Jericho is not far outside of Jerusalem, but Jesus is walking through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem, where he will have the triumphal entry happen, and then a week later he will have Passover and be crucified, all in Jerusalem. So this is his last miracle before he heads into Jerusalem, but he's on his way there. Now Jerusalem was the epicenter of the entire nation of Israel. Remember back when King David established it, not just as the political center of Israel, but as the religious center of Israel. He made the temple there, and eventually Solomon finished it, where it became known as the Mecca of Israel. I mean, it was the place you went to for all of your religious stuff, but also all your political stuff. I mean, it was that city. And David made it such. And David was the greatest king Israel had ever seen. And he was known as a great king, not just in Israel's time, but in all of the surrounding nations. He had taken them from a small, struggling nation to a world superpower. And he was so well known and revered that people still talked about David. But not just was David a great king, David was to beget a great king. The prophecies in 2 Samuel chapter 7 say that he wouldn't just be a great king himself, but that later on, the king, the Messiah, this Jesus was going to come through his lineage. So that he was not just a great king himself, but someday we would see a great ruler come out of him, and his kingdom, it says, will never end. And it's talking about the kingdom of heaven that Jesus is ushering in. This kingdom that will never end. This kingdom that is now closer than we ever thought possible. This kingdom that is now here to meet people in their brokenness. And it says that as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, that is son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. So Jesus is traveling at this point with a large crowd. He's got a posse with him, and he is traveling with all of them together. Now, don't assume that they're all good people or they're all people who understand what Jesus is teaching. It is likely that a lot of these people are there because they've seen the success Jesus is having. They've seen Jesus perform miracles. And so they're not there because of who Jesus is. It's very possible they're there because they've seen what Jesus does. And they don't just want Jesus for who he is, they want him for what he can do for them. Imagine yourself around a world leader or somebody who's very famous or somebody who's just really well known. I know for me, when I've been around people who are very famous or very well known, it's fascinating to watch how people kind of try to climb. You know what I'm talking about? They try to kind of move up in the ranks and try to get closer to that person. They're trying to become the best friend. They're trying to drop names. They're trying to talk about all the cool things they do. They're trying to get closer and closer by impressing them with what they have or what they've done or who they are. They're trying to move higher and higher in the ranks. We know that Jesus had people doing this all the time around him. Even his own disciples, they were trying to climb the ranks. Who would be the greatest? Who would be the best? They didn't understand what Jesus was after. I would imagine they're trying to impress him with who they are or what they've done, or they're trying to flatter him by saying nice things about him, or they're trying to overwhelm him with their achievements or their accomplishments, their accolades. And what we know is Jesus is never impressed with our accomplishments necessarily. He's never really impressed with our achievements. He's never impressed with what we've accumulated, the things or the wealth we have. Jesus isn't impressed by those things. He's not overwhelmed by these things. He's not flattered by these things. That Jesus didn't come for us to show him how great we are. He came for those who realize that they have a brokenness. He came for those who realize that maybe things aren't great. He says he didn't come for those who are well. He came for the sick. He didn't come for those who were going to try to impress him or overwhelm him or flatter him. He came for those who realize that he's beyond their resume. And so this crowd is gathered around Jesus, but they don't seem to fully get it. And we'll see in just a second how they don't get it. But he's surrounded by this crowd. And then it says that this man Bartimaeus, which Bartimaeus, it might even say in your Bible, means son of Timaeus. Now, we actually very seldomly see the names of people who were healed by Jesus. If you pay attention, very seldomly does it say their name. Most of the time it just tells us a man or a woman. It does not tell us their name, does not tell us who they are. It's interesting that they do say his name here. Now, there could be a couple reasons for this. One reason that some scholars believe is that in 360 BC, Plato wrote an entire play called Timaeus. And Timaeus was a man in the play who was reading and kind of presenting this soliloquy. And the whole idea was, where did the universe come from? Who originated this universe and who organized this universe? That's what he's looking for. He's trying to find out these two things. And some people believe that maybe he's being included here, that Timaeus is here because this is showing us who this king is, that this Timaeus has been looking for a creator, looking for an originator, and now he's found it in Jesus. But the other belief is that Bartimaeus may be mentioned because he is actually one who didn't just disappear after the miracle happened. Maybe some of these other people came along, they asked Jesus for a certain thing, and then Jesus healed them, and then they went about their way. Not so with Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus had a full life-changing experience, not just physically, but spiritually, to where he changed his entire life to follow Jesus. And so they would have known his name for years to come because he would have been around all the Jesus followers. They would have had him as a part of their group from that point forward. And it says that he was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, which he heard it because he was blind, he couldn't see it, which my son actually asked me that question this week. We were talking about this, and Oliver always loves to know what I'm teaching on the weekends. I don't know why. And so we're talking about what I was teaching about. And I said, and then Jesus came by and he goes, hold on, Dad, hold on. If he's blind, how does he know Jesus is there? And I had to explain to him kindly that it says that he heard that Jesus was there because blind people can still hear. And he was like, oh, right, Dad, that's good. That's good. You should teach about that. So here I am teaching about that. You're welcome. You can thank Oliver for it. It says, when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout. He began just yelling, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And here's what I love, is that while this crowd sees Jesus for maybe what he can do for them, Bartimaeus sees Jesus not as what he can do, but as who he is. He's the Son of David, meaning he is this promised Messiah. He's the one from a kingdom that we can't see who has brought that kingdom so close to us. And all it takes is us realizing that we need healing for us to be healed. Because the kingdom of heaven is not someday, it is here. And if we can just admit our need, maybe we can be healed too. And he recognizes this in Jesus. Not just the things that he can do. He sees them as who he is. The God of the heavens bringing his kingdom here to earth. And he yells out for him. It says that he screams out, Jesus, Son of David, and then he says, have mercy on me. He recognizes that he needs mercy. He recognizes that he needs help. He recognizes that he needs healing. And when the kingdom of heaven is so close, sometimes we're so far away. Why? Because we can't admit this. We just can't say it. It's like the words don't come out of our mouths that we need mercy, that we need healing, that we need divine intervention, that we can't do this on our own, right? That we actually have a need in our lives. It says he began to shout, Son of David, have mercy on me. And then it says about that crowd, many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. See, they didn't quite get it. They were near Jesus physically. They were near Jesus in proximity, but spiritually they were miles and miles away from who this Jesus is. Spiritually, they did not understand who Jesus really was. They didn't understand who he came for. He didn't come for the climbers. He didn't come for the ones who could impress him. He didn't come for the ones who were trying to flatter him. He didn't come for the ones who were trying to overwhelm him. He wasn't here to hear about their acquisitions. He wasn't here to hear about their accomplishments. He wasn't here to hear about their accolades. He was here to heal those who would admit they were broken. And the crowd doesn't get it, but Jesus does. And it says that while they told him to be quiet, he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. He doesn't give up. He doesn't give in. He doesn't back down. He takes heart. He takes courage, and he continues to yell not just who Jesus is, but he continues to yell about what it is that he needs. He admits it so openly, so freely, so vocally. I need your mercy. I need you. I cannot get out of this without you. He says it so clearly, and he yells it out even more. And it says that at this, Jesus stopped and said, call him. And so they called the blind man. This crowd says to him, hey, good news. And they say, cheer up. Now here's the words. Cheer up is this tharseo. It's the take heart. It's the take courage. It means cheer up. Have good cheer. Get on your feet. He's calling you. See, they understand what's happening. See, they understand that the brokenness of his world is about to meet the perfection of the kingdom of heaven, and he should take heart. He should be excited. And it says that throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and he came to Jesus. And then Jesus asks him a question. And it's like a Captain Obvious question that doesn't make any sense. Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus asks him. What do you want me to do for you? And I wonder why Jesus asked this question. I mean, there's like a million ideas of why Jesus asked this question, what he's trying to get at, what is the point he's trying to make. But my sense is that there are times where we just have to speak up about it. Where we just have to tell Jesus what it is we need. And we have to admit that we need him. I think a lot of times in our culture, we don't admit that we need Jesus. We like to admit that we are cool with Jesus, that we like Jesus, that Jesus seems like a nice guy, that we follow the way of Jesus or the teachings of Jesus, but we don't like to admit that we need Jesus. That without him, we wouldn't be able to live. That without him, we would not be able to be healed. That without him, we would not understand or see the kingdom of heaven. I don't think we like to admit that we need anyone. But when it comes to Jesus, we have a hard time admitting our need, don't we? And he asks him, what do you want from me? What is it you want? And the man replies, Rabbi. Again, he calls him by what he is, a teacher. Rabbi, I want to see. I want to see. And by saying this, he knows that he can't fix it himself. He can't do it on his own. He wants to see. And there's only one person who can let him. There's only one originator of this world, one organizer of this world who can allow him to see again. There's only one way that works. And notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say like, well, you know what, Jesus, though, I've done a lot of good things. You know what, Jesus, let me tell you about the things I've accomplished. Let me tell you about how I've done things right. Let me tell you about my accolades or my achievements or my accumulation of things. He doesn't start off with his merits or his resume. That's not what Jesus needs here. All he needs to know is that this man wants to see and realizes he can't do it on his own. That's all he needs. And so he says, I want to see. And then Jesus says, go. Your faith has healed you. Your faith has healed you. Not the good things you've done, not the actions you've taken, not your accumulation of things, not your accolades, not your accomplishments. Your faith has healed you. And he says, immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. So last week, if you were watching the service online, you know that I was teaching by a lakeside to talk about Jesus walking on the water. And so while I was outside, I took a drone with me to fly up in the air and get some aerial shots of the lake. And this is something I do a lot. I like to make videos, and it's something I do for a lot of other people. So I figured I might as well try it while I was there and take the drone out. So I was flying that drone. I had people ask me about it. And yes, it was a fun experience. And yes, I flew a drone. And yes, it's super cool. But that drone hasn't always worked. And to be honest with you, a few months ago, I was out making a video. And I was at the Rays Stadium at Tropicana Field. And I was making a video kind of in conjunction with them. And so I asked them, can I go fly a drone and shoot a video of the side of Tropicana Field? I said, could I just put this up in the air? And they were like, well, we're really not supposed to do that. And I was like, well, I promise I'll do it really quick. It'll be really good. And they were like, we're really not supposed to. And I was like, listen, guys, I know what I'm doing. I've flown drones before. I promise I'll make it as quick as possible. I'm really good at this. I've got it figured out. Trust me. I've even looked at the flight path of where I want it to go, and I've looked around the area. Nobody's there. I promise I'm a pro. Just let me get it done real quick. And they were like, okay, that's fine. And they sent a guy with me who was going to kind of oversee me to make sure that I knew what I was doing. And this guy, he is a drone guy himself. And he was there with me, and he was like watching me as I was supposed to fly the drone. And so he was paying attention to what I was doing. I was kind of just like very arrogantly like, I got this, don't worry about it. Done this a million times. And so I took the drone up in the air and I flew it over a billboard. It looked super cool. And then I took it over towards the stadium, and it started to get a little bit away from me, and the wind picked up, and I wasn't paying very good attention, and I started to fly it faster and faster, getting the shot that I thought I needed as quickly as I possibly could, showing them that I was fully capable of doing this. And as I was so busy showing them how good I was at flying a drone, it flew directly right into the side of the stadium, and it shattered into like a million pieces and then fell down onto the ground. And so I looked at the guy who was next to me, and he was like, did you just break your drone? And I was like, no, probably not. I think it's fine. And he told me, he was like, if you need me to fix it, I fix drones. And I was like, I didn't break it. It's probably fine. And don't worry about it. And he was like, I think you might have broken it. I was like, I didn't break it. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know where my son gets these things when he breaks stuff and everything. Don't know where this behavior comes from. But I was like, no, I can fix it. It's fine. I'll take care of it. So I go to find the drone by myself, and I find it. It's laying in these bushes, and it is in a million pieces. It's all broken apart. And so I took the drone home, and I thought, I can fix this. I can do it myself. So I laid it on a table, and I started to put pieces together, and I ordered a couple parts on eBay, and I tried to fit them in together, and I tried to make the whole thing come back together, and it wasn't working. All I had done at this point was, instead of piecing it back together, I had taken it more apart. And I just had pieces, just crumbs of a drone, all in a box at this point, with all these tools laying around and nothing getting better, only getting worse. And so finally one day, I had to admit that I couldn't do it. And I called the guy who fixes drones. And I said, hey, I just need to tell you something. I think I probably can't fix this drone after all. Would you mind, taking a look at it? And he was like, sure, bring it down. So I took it to him, and I showed up with it just in a box of pieces, a mess of a drone, and I just handed it to him. I said, here's this. Is there any way you can put it back together? And he didn't laugh at me. He didn't mock me. He didn't make less of me. He just looked at it and he said, yeah, I can fix it. This is over a drone, guys. I understand this is not a big deal. But I can't tell you the weight that came off my chest. And it wasn't just the weight of thinking, did I lose this expensive piece of equipment? It was the weight of admitting to somebody that I couldn't do it. And for them to accept that and just be like, okay, maybe you can't do it. And not to judge me, not to think less of me, but just to be okay with me and all of my broken pieces. And he fixed it. But the only way it got fixed, the only way it got resolved, the only way it got healed was when I admitted that I needed help. When I admitted that I couldn't do it on my own. When I not just knew I had a need, but when I said, I need your help. I think Jesus asked this man this question because he needs the man to just admit that he needs his help. And I think today, many of us are in a place where we know that we need help, but we've never said it. Where we know that we can't do it on our own, but we'll never admit it. And I think it's keeping us in the broken parts of earth when the perfection of heaven is just so nearby. But we have to be willing to admit that we have a need. We have to be willing to admit that we need a Savior. And when we do that, I believe, just like Bartimaeus, we will see a miracle happen. Today, maybe you're in a spot where you have a need. Today, maybe you're in a place where you know, I can't do this alone anymore. And maybe you just need to admit your need and ask for the perfection of heaven to meet you right now in your brokenness. Would you pray with me? Jesus, we know that we are flawed. We know we are fallen. We know we are broken. And we know that we need help. And today, would we be bold enough? Would we be brave enough would we have the courage to come to you with our needs and to tell you that we need you. We need your perfection of heaven to meet us in the brokenness of our lives. We need your perfection of heaven to meet us in the brokenness of this world. We need you to meet us in the brokenness of our families, in the brokenness of the pain that we live with, in the brokenness of our workplaces, in the brokenness of our homes. We need you to meet us there. And we admit to you, we cannot do this alone. Whether it's parenting, we can't do it alone. Whether it's marriage, we can't do it alone. Whether it's our jobs, we can't do it alone. Whether it's our own stress or anxiety or worry, we cannot do it alone. And so we bring these things to you and admit our need to you. We love you and we thank you for promising that you will meet us in the midst of our brokenness, and that we will see miracles happen in our lives. Praise things in your name. Amen. Hey friends, thanks for being here today. Hop on Zoom with us right now, and we'd love to connect with you and hear how you're doing and be able to chat for a few minutes. Have a great week. We'll see you back here online next week.